Have you ever stopped to think about what really keeps our society standing? I'm not just talking about laws, governments, or the economy. Those are just the storefront. The question here goes deeper. Could there be something more fragile, almost invisible, holding it all together? And if there is, what happens when that foundation starts to crack? Think about it. Everything you take for granted, security, order, progress, might be a more delicate illusion than it seems. Rousseau, back in the 18th century, famously said, "Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains." These chains, are they what keep us from descending into chaos? Or are they the very thing that tightens until everything collapses? Our modern world, with its skyscrapers glowing at night and technologies that feel like superpowers, seems unshakable, doesn't it? But is it really? Behind this facade of stability lies a question that sends a chill down your spine. What's truly missing? The one thing, for it all to come crashing down. Now, travel back in time with me. Imagine a person from thousands of years ago. They lived off the basics: hunting, gathering, surviving. There were no governments, no social media, no bills to pay. It was just them, nature, and the next challenge. Now picture that same person thrown into the chaos of a modern city. Where do you think they'd feel safer, happier, more human? This isn't just a philosophical dilemma. It reveals how fragile the balance we call civilization really is. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We'll journey between the past and the present, guided by two brilliant minds who saw human nature in completely opposite ways. Rousseau, who believed civilization corrupted us, and Hobbes, who argued that without it, we're monsters. Between these extremes lies an uncomfortable truth. Perhaps we're a bit of both. Heroes and villains, builders and destroyers of everything around us. Get ready to question what it means to live in society, the price of progress, and what truly sustains the order we hold so dear. Because, spoiler alert, collapse is often closer than it seems. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the first human walking on Earth. No rules, no governments, no concept of an organized society, just them and the world. For Jean-Jacques Rousseau, this scenario was not just a fascinating idea, it was the representation of our purest essence. He called it the state of nature, a state where humans, according to him, were naturally good, generous, in harmony with the life around them. But as you can imagine, something changed. Civilization emerged and brought with it a complicated baggage: comparisons, pride, disputes. It's as if, the moment we began building cities, we also started disconnecting from who we truly are. Rousseau viewed this original world in a very different way from other thinkers. He didn't believe that primitive life was brutal or savage in a negative sense. On the contrary, he saw simplicity. The needs were basic: food, shelter, safety, no greed, no endless competition. He said something powerful. The savage man lives within himself. The civilized man is always outside himself, unable to live except in the opinions of others. It's as though, by becoming civilized, we began living for the applause, or the judgment, of those around us. Of course, Rousseau wasn't dreaming of a perfect paradise. He knew that life in the state of nature had its challenges: finding food, surviving predators, dealing with unpredictable changes in the climate. But even with these dangers, he believed that people lived more connected to their instincts, their emotions, their essence, without property, without hierarchies, without the need to dominate one another. And then came the turning point, what he called our original sin: private property. Rousseau didn't mince words. The first man who, having enclosed a piece of land, thought of saying, "This is mine," and found people simple enough to believe him, was the true founder of civil society. It was at that moment, according to him, that we broke the balance. From then on, what was equality turned into competition. What was harmony became exploitation. The seed of inequality was planted, and let's face it, it grew fast. Rousseau swam against the current of his time. While the Enlightenment celebrated science, technology, and the arts as the pinnacle of human progress, he viewed them with suspicion. To him, these advancements didn't make us better. They made us more artificial. We created a society where appearances matter more than essence, where possessions and status replace kindness and authenticity. But was he right? Is it really possible to return to the simplicity he described? Or is the noble savage just a beautiful dream, a nostalgia for something that never truly existed? These questions remain alive. They compel us to look at the world we've built and ask ourselves, are we truly better off, or just busier and more distracted? Rousseau didn't have all the answers, and he knew it. After all, how can we reconcile the brutality of the past with the complexities of the present? How can we let go of everything we've learned, created, and accumulated? Even so, his ideas are an invitation. An invitation to pause and reflect. What have we lost along the way? Is there anything we can recover? Perhaps we can't return to the past, but as Rousseau believed, we can question the present. We can rethink the structures we've created and seek ways to reconnect with ourselves, with others, and with what truly matters. Not to live like savages, but to finally become, in essence, more human. If Rousseau saw the state of nature as a lost paradise, Thomas Hobbes viewed it as the setting of a horror movie. For Hobbes, there was nothing harmonious or simple about the world before organized societies. In his view, life was a relentless struggle for survival, a chaos so profound that he described it with a chilling phrase: solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. While Rousseau believed we were naturally good, Hobbes saw human beings in their rawest essence as dangerous. Imagine a world where trusting others is impossible. Every person is a potential threat. The next attack, the next betrayal, could come from anywhere, at any time. For Hobbes, this was exactly how life was in the state of nature, a war of all against all. In this grim portrayal, there is no room for cooperation or kindness. The only instinct that prevails is self-preservation. It is with this vision that Hobbes builds the foundation of his most famous work, Leviathan. He argues that the only way out of this chaos is something radical, a social contract. In this agreement, every individual gives up part of their freedom in exchange for security. For Hobbes, it was essential to have a strong, centralized, and preferably absolute government. Without it, nothing, absolutely nothing, would function. Trade, progress, peace, everything would crumble into dust under the weight of uncertainty and violence. Now compare this with Rousseau. While Rousseau saw civilization as the great villain that corrupted mankind, Hobbes saw it as our only chance of salvation. Social institutions, in Hobbes's view, may be imperfect, but they are necessary to restrain the destructive impulses he believed were innate in us. And yes, he acknowledged that living under a government meant sacrificing freedom. But in his logic, it was a fair price to avoid returning to primitive chaos. Of course, not everyone buys into this idea. Was Hobbes right in claiming that human beings are inherently selfish and violent? Some historians and anthropologists argue that, in many tribal societies, cooperation and solidarity were fundamental for survival. Hobbes's view overlooks this evidence, focusing instead on a hypothetical scenario where everyone acts solely out of self-interest. And the issue doesn't stop there. Hobbes's idea of an absolute government, the so-called Leviathan, also raises eyebrows. In a world where we have seen oppressive rulers cause historical tragedies, handing over so much power to a central authority seems dangerous, to say the least. What happens when the Leviathan becomes the very monster it was meant to combat? For Hobbes, even a tyrannical ruler would be better than chaos, but that justification is hard to swallow for those who have lived under authoritarian regimes. In the end, the debate between Hobbes and Rousseau goes far beyond philosophy. It touches on who we are as a species and the kind of society we want to build. Rousseau dreamed of a return to purity and simplicity, while Hobbes insisted that only order and progress could save us from ourselves. And between these extremes lie the big questions. Are we inherently good or evil? And what is the true cost of civilization? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. Rousseau may have been overly optimistic, while Hobbes leaned too far into pessimism. Humanity, after all, is a paradox, capable of creating and destroying, cooperating and competing, loving and hating. And on the edge of this duality, we continue to build and question the world we live in. When we look at the history of civilization, it's impossible not to feel a mix of fascination and discomfort. Think about the incredible cities that rose from nothing, the scientific breakthroughs that changed the course of humanity, and the connections that now take us anywhere on the planet with a single click. But with this progress comes an unsettling question. What have we truly gained, and what have we lost along the way? Has civilization elevated us, or has it distanced us from who we really are? Jean-Jacques Rousseau had a very clear opinion on the matter. To him, as civilization advanced, humanity paid a steep price. In his discourse on the origin and basis of inequality among men, he argued that progress had created a society obsessed with appearances, where a person's worth is no longer measured by who they are, but by what they own. He saw private property as the turning point that transformed cooperation into competition and solidarity into inequality. But Rousseau wasn't alone in the debate. Philosophers like Voltaire and Diderot disagreed with his view. To them, the arts, sciences, and commerce were humanity's salvation, the key to freeing us from ignorance and superstition. They believed that progress made us more enlightened, more liberated. It was the typical optimism of the Enlightenment. But as Rousseau warned, they might have been overlooking the hidden costs of this advancement. And today, well, our world seems like a long list of paradoxes. Technology connects us like never before, yet it also pulls us apart, each of us stuck in our own digital bubble. Globalization has brought incredible wealth to some, but it has also deepened inequalities for many others. For every innovation that improves our lives, it seems a new moral or social crisis emerges. We're more connected, but we feel lonelier, wealthier, but are we truly happier? Rousseau spoke of something called amour propre, or self-love, not the healthy kind of love you feel for yourself, but a vanity that drives us to seek constant approval in the eyes of others. He believed that in the state of nature, we were motivated by amour de soi, a pure, instinctive love focused on survival and living well. But modern society, with its endless comparisons and competitions, has turned this into a relentless pursuit of status and validation, and it's undeniable. Look around. Social media, consumerism, the race for success, all of it disconnects us from our most essential values. Meanwhile, the systems that uphold our civilization are showing deeper cracks: climate crises, political polarization, inequality. We're at a critical moment where the weight of what we've built threatens our ability to sustain it all. On the other hand, it would be unfair to ignore the benefits of civilization. We live longer. Diseases that were once death sentences now have cures. In many places, individual freedoms are greater than they've ever been. As Hobbes might argue, progress has brought order and security, preventing the chaos he so feared in the state of nature, but at what cost? Perhaps the problem isn't civilization itself, but how we've chosen to organize it. Is it possible to find a balance between material progress and human well-being? Or are we destined to repeat the mistakes of other civilizations that grew too large and collapsed under the weight of their own contradictions? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're precisely the ones that invite us to reflect on the kind of world we want to leave behind. After all, civilization is about building, and the choice of what to build is always in our hands. Civilization has brought us lights that never go out, conversations that cross oceans in seconds, and the ability to travel the world in just a few hours. But here's the lingering question. Has all this progress truly brought us closer together, or has it isolated us even more? This is the dilemma of modernity. While we celebrate our technological and social achievements, we face a silent epidemic of loneliness, anxiety, and disconnection. Rousseau raised an important warning. He argued that as civilization advanced, we became prisoners of something he called a distorted self-love, driving us to seek external validation and compete for status and recognition. Today, it seems he wasn't entirely wrong. Social media, for instance, has turned our lives into a stage. We're constantly posting, chasing likes, watching the numbers, and seeking approval. But is this really connection, or just a new form of loneliness? And then there's technology. In theory, it should unite us. We're more accessible than ever. But the reality is that the quality of human interaction seems to be declining. Studies show that the more time we spend glued to our devices, the lonelier, more anxious, and even more depressed we feel. Rousseau would likely see this as the reflection of a civilization that, instead of nourishing humanity, traps us in an invisible prison. On the other hand, Thomas Hobbes might interpret all this differently. He would view these technological tools as extensions of the social contract, tools that help maintain order and communication in massive societies. But let's be honest, even Hobbes's Leviathan seems powerless against the ethical dilemmas technology has brought. Think about the political polarization fueled by social media, the manipulation of personal data, or the spread of fake news. It's a complicated landscape where progress simultaneously builds bridges and digs chasms. And it doesn't stop there. Progress doesn't just create barriers between us, it also distances us from something essential: nature. In the past, we lived in harmony with it. We understood the cycles and recognized our dependence. Today, surrounded by concrete, screens, and noise, we're more disconnected than ever. For Rousseau, this separation isn't just environmental, it's existential. He believed that by distancing ourselves from nature, we also distance ourselves from our true selves. But would it be fair to say that progress is just a villain? Not at all. It has given us incredible possibilities. We can connect with people on the other side of the world, learn about different cultures, and unite voices for common causes. The real question is, how do we find balance? How do we use what we've created to strengthen ourselves rather than fragment us further? Finding that balance is a challenge. Remote work, for instance, gives us freedom but takes away human interaction in the office. Digital entertainment amuses us but also traps us in bubbles where we only see what we want to see. For every advancement that brings us closer, there seems to be another that pulls us apart. And the lingering question is, Are we solving today's problems, or are we simply planting the seeds of tomorrow's challenges? In the end, progress is a double-edged sword. It provides us with incredible tools, but also forces us to make difficult choices. Now more than ever, we must decide what kind of world we want to build. After all, we are the architects of our own future. The big question is, will we build a world of genuine connections, or will we keep stacking invisible walls between us? History is like a restless mirror. It reflects the choices we've made as a civilization, and at the same time acts as that persistent teacher, always trying to impart lessons we often prefer to ignore. When we look at the past, it's not hard to notice a pattern. Societies are born, grow, face crises, and, in some cases, collapse. But why? And perhaps more importantly, what can we learn from these repetitions to avoid the same fate? Rousseau left us with a clear warning about the dangers of inequality and alienation. He saw private property as the starting point of a spiral of competition, greed, and disconnection that pulled us away from our true essence. It's not hard to draw parallels to today's world. Economic and social inequalities have reached alarming levels, with a small group hoarding wealth while so many struggle to survive. Are we repeating the mistakes of ancient civilizations that ignored these warning signs until it was too late? On the other hand, Thomas Hobbes highlighted another fundamental aspect: the importance of order. He believed that without a strong social contract, societies would collapse into a state of chaos, dominated by distrust and violence. History has shown that he wasn't wrong, but it has also taught us that overly authoritarian structures can be just as destructive. Suppressing freedom, creativity, and the human spirit is like extinguishing the fire that drives progress. And here's the fascinating point. History is not just a record of failures and collapses, it's also a testament to human resilience. Even in the face of devastating crises, we have an incredible ability to adapt and reinvent ourselves. The Renaissance, for example, emerged from the ashes of a dark period, proving that even adversity can serve as a catalyst for transformation. But can we expect this pattern of decline and rebirth to continue in the modern world? Today, our global interconnectedness is so profound that the problem of one country quickly becomes the problem of all. Climate change, global inequalities, political instability, these are challenges no nation can solve alone. This is where our interdependence reveals its two sides. It is our greatest strength, but also our greatest vulnerability. Perhaps it's time to take a bit of Rousseau and a bit of Hobbes to create something new. We need structures that maintain order but also promote equality and human connection. This requires balance, a model that doesn't concentrate too much power in the hands of a few, yet encourages cooperation and collective responsibility. Difficult? Undoubtedly, but not impossible. What history ultimately shows us is that societies thrive when their foundations are built on belonging, purpose, and justice. Without these pillars, everything begins to crumble. But if we are willing to learn from the mistakes of the past and act with courage and compassion in the present, we can prevent those mistakes from repeating. As Will Durant said, civilization exists by geological consent, subject to change without notice. It is up to us to build a world that doesn't rely solely on luck, but on wisdom. A world where we can not only survive, but thrive together. And it begins now, with the choices we make today. The society we've built is as impressive as it is fragile. At times, it feels like we're walking a tightrope, trying to balance progress with the constant risk of everything collapsing. Today, we explore the ideas of Rousseau and Hobbes, two thinkers who viewed civilization in such different ways, yet may have shared a common truth. Because we, as human beings, are walking paradoxes, capable of creating order while simultaneously sowing chaos. We build extraordinary wonders and yet often stumble over the excesses we ourselves generate. Rousseau reminds us of something essential, the simplicity and goodness that can be lost amidst the noise of modern life. He challenges us to reflect on what truly matters, on what we've left behind in the name of progress. On the other hand, Hobbes pulls us toward another extreme, reminding us that without order and stability, we are vulnerable to falling into chaos. Together, they compel us to confront an essential truth. The choices we make today are the ones that will shape our tomorrow. And then comes the question no one likes to ask but must be asked: what will be the legacy of our generation? Are we creating a world that can withstand inevitable challenges, or are we merely building an unstable pile that will inevitably collapse sooner or later? These questions may be uncomfortable, but they also serve as a call to responsibility. Because, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote, the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and it is precisely there, within each of our hearts, that the choice lies. Which way will we tip the scales? The future is still in our hands. May we build it with wisdom, courage, and compassion. After all, this is what truly defines the legacy we will leave for those who come after us. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank you for staying with us until now. This video isn't just about philosophy, history, or abstract ideas. It's about us, about the choices we make every day, the values we carry, and the kind of future we want to build together. And of course, about the impact we leave on the lives around us. You know, once, when I revisited the place where I grew up, I found an old diary I had written as a teenager. On one of the pages, there was a question: what will I leave behind when it's all over? At the time, it felt like just a fleeting thought, but today, as I reflect on the ideas of Rousseau and Hobbes, I realize that question has never stopped being relevant. The answer might not lie in what we build, but in what we preserve: our humanity, our values, and most importantly, our ability to care for one another. If this video made you think about what it means to live in a society, about what truly matters, and what we can or should change, then it has already served its purpose. And now I want to hear from you. What's your take on all of this? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's turn this reflection into a conversation, because the best answers are born from dialogue. Oh, and if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might also find it inspiring. Philosophy, after all, doesn't thrive on ready-made answers, but on the questions that connect us. Finally, if you're still curious, there are 2 more videos on the screen now. One explores the concept of progress in a hyper-connected world. The other dives into how crises shape and transform societies. I won't spoil the surprise, but I promise they're worth it. I'll see you there.